The darkness before dawn holds a different quality in these ancient stones. It is not the darkness you know, softened by street lamps bleeding through curtains, punctuated by the glow of charging devices. This darkness is complete, a living presence that fills the narrow chamber where you wake, pressing against your eyelids, filling your lungs with air so cold it carries weight. You cannot see your hand even when you hold it before your face. The stone walls around you, thick as a grown man is tall, have been holding this cold all through the night, and now they release it inward into the small space where you lie beneath wool that smells of the animal it came from, of lanolin and weather and the long forgetting of the fields. The bells have pulled you from sleep, deep in the castle's stone heart, in the chapel that rises in one of the towers. Someone has rung the iron bell for matins. The sound travels through corridors and up winding stairs, softened by distance and thick walls, but insistent, marking the night's darkest hour with a call to prayer. This is 2 hours past midnight, perhaps 3. You are waking in a castle, in a time when such places were not ruins for tourists, but living fortresses, when their walls held not history, but people, hundreds of souls moving through daily rhythms that have dissolved into the past like morning mist. But for now, in this moment between sleep and waking, those rhythms surround you, and you are part of them. Your bed is a frame of wood raised slightly from the stone floor, a privilege that marks you as something more than the lowest servants, who sleep on rushes scattered directly on those cold stones. Upon the frame lies a canvas sack stuffed with straw, and the straw has shifted during the night, forming valleys and ridges beneath you. The bell's voice fades into silence, but you are awake now, and there is no returning to sleep. The day begins in darkness, as it has begun for centuries, as it will begin tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow. For a moment you lie still, gathering courage, or perhaps simply postponing the inevitable. The straw beneath you whispers with each small movement. Your breath forms clouds that you cannot see but can feel, moisture hanging in the frozen air before your face. The wool blanket covering you is heavy, so heavy it seems you might not be able to rise from under its weight. But even this heaviness has not been enough. The cold has found you anyway, settling into your bones with the patient persistence of winter coming on. Your joints ache with it. Your face, exposed to the air, is numb with it. Then you push the blanket aside, and the cold rushes in like water, shocking even though you knew it would come. You gasp without meaning to. The sound hangs in the darkness. You are wearing the same linen undergarment you wore yesterday beneath your outer clothes, the same one you will wear tomorrow, rough woven and unchanged for weeks, because water is too precious and labor too expensive to waste on frequent washing. The fabric has grown stiff with body oils and dirt, but this is normal, expected. Your feet find a floor, and the shock of it travels up your legs, into your spine, into your teeth. The stone is like touching ice, solid and unforgiving. In the darkness, your hands fumble for your shoes, simple leather things that you stuffed with straw last night to help preserve their shape and add whatever small warmth such stuffing might provide. Somewhere in the castle, other people are stirring, responding to the same bell that woke you, and their movements create small sounds that carry through the stone corridors. A door opening, footsteps, soft and careful, a cough quickly muffled. The oil and dirt add a layer that helps keep out the wind when you go outside. Everyone smells this way. You have long since stopped noticing. 3 paces to the door, arms extended to avoid walking into the wall. You know this distance by heart, having walked it every morning in darkness for so long that your body remembers even when your mind is still fogged with sleep. Your fingers find the rough wood of the door, follow it down to where the iron latch waits. You shake out the straw, hearing it scatter across the floor to mix with the rushes there, and push your feet into the shoes. The leather is stiff with cold, resisting, but you force your feet in any way, and after a moment of standing, the shoes begin to soften slightly, the leather remembering the shape of your feet. The corridor beyond your chamber holds a dim glow, distant and wavering, firelight from somewhere deep in the castle's heart. The great hearth in the hall is never allowed to die, because rekindling fire from flint and steel is laborious, and fire is life here, necessary for everything that sustains existence. You move down the corridor with one hand trailing along the wall for guidance. The wall surface is rough under your fingers, uneven stone that radiates cold as if it has spent the night absorbing the chill from outside, and now releases it slowly into these interior spaces. You cannot keep your hand there long. The cold becomes painful. The corridor carries sounds. Your own footsteps, soft but echoing. Other footsteps, somewhere ahead or behind, impossible to tell in these stone passages that capture sound and send it traveling in strange directions. Voices, very low, murmuring. The metal is painfully cold, so cold it seems to burn, and you must lift it quickly and pull the door open before your fingers go completely numb. Someone has tended the fire through the night, feeding it carefully, keeping it alive until morning. You touch the wall, pull away, touch again, using it for direction rather than support. You reach the stairway, a tight spiral of stone steps worn smooth by countless feet over decades, perhaps over centuries. There is no railing, only the central column and the outer wall. You keep your hand on that outer wall and descend carefully, feeling for each step in the dimness. The constant, almost silence of a castle waking, never fully quiet, because in a castle there are always some people awake, always fires burning, always someone moving through the darkness on some necessary task. As you descend, the air grows fractionally warmer and the light increases. You are moving toward the great hall, the castle's beating heart, where the vast central hearth burns day and night from the first frost of autumn until the last cold of spring. The steps are uneven, each one slightly different in height and depth, more in the center where most feet have trodden. In this dim light, you must move with care because a fall here could mean broken bones, and broken bones in this time can mean death or lifelong pain. The great hearth dominates one end of the hall, a massive construction of stone with a fire that will not be allowed to die for months. The coals glow red and orange, pulsing slightly as drafts find them, and a few flames dance above, casting wavering shadows that climb the walls and reach toward the rafters high overhead. The stairway opens into the hall, and after the near-total darkness of your chamber and the dimness of the corridors, the firelight seems almost bright, though it is only the glow of coals and a few flames banked low through the night, but still alive, still giving light and warmth. A servant crouches by the hearth, placing new logs onto the coals with the careful attention of someone who knows this task is both essential and daily, someone who has done this every morning for so long that the movements are automatic. He arranges the logs to allow air to flow, to encourage the flames to catch and grow, but not so much that the wood will burn too quickly. Those rafters are massive oak beams, blackened with years of smoke, holding up the roof that keeps out the rain and snow. The hall's ceiling is high, magnificent and imposing, but this height means the warmth rises and rises, dissipating into the vast space above, while at floor level the air, is only slightly warmer than in the corridors. Near the fire sits an old woman, wrapped in layers of wool and sheepskin, her hands stretched toward the warmth. Perhaps she has been here all night, unable to sleep in the cold of some distant chamber, or perhaps she is ill and the warmth eases whatever pain troubles her. Her eyes are fixed on the flames, watching them flicker and dance, and she does not look up when you approach. You stand near the fire, close enough to feel its heat on your face and hands, and gradually the bone-deep chill that woke with you begins to loosen. You flex your fingers, working feeling back into them, and shift from foot to foot, letting warmth reach through your shoes to your feet. Around you the hall is coming to life. What is precious, requiring labor to cut, to transport, to store and dry. A great castle consumes forests of wood each winter, wagon load after wagon load disappearing into flames. In the firelight her face is all hollows and ridges, all age and weariness, but also a kind of peace that comes from being warm after being cold. You approach the basin and cup your hands, lifting water to your face. It is barely warm, heated only slightly by sitting near the fire, but it is wet and clean, and you splash it over your face, feeling it trickle down your cheeks and neck, dripping onto your chest where it soaks into the linen of your undergarment. There is no soap. More servants appear, moving quietly, purposefully, beginning the day's endless round of tasks. A woman carries a basin of water and sets it on a bench near the fire. Steam rises faintly from the water's surface, visible in the cold air. This is for washing, a brief rinse of face and hands that serves as morning ablutions for most people in the castle. The sky beyond the narrow windows is beginning to show the first faint suggestion that it is not, after all, eternal night. The black is fading to deep blue, the change so gradual you cannot see it happening, but only notice when you look away and look back that yes, it is lighter now than it was before. Soap is made from tallow and lye, expensive and labor-intensive, reserved for washing linens and for the Lord's family, and even then used sparingly. You dry your face and hands on a coarse linen cloth hanging beside the basin, a cloth already damp from others who used it before you. The castle wakes more fully now. Doors open and close throughout the building. Footsteps multiply, creating a constant soft thunder of movement. Voices remain low, respect for the early hour still governing behavior. But they create a murmur that fills the hall, the sound of a community stirring to life. The first meal of the day is still hours away. People in this time do not break their fast upon waking as you might do in your own time. The first meal comes later in the morning, after the service of prime, after several hours of labor. Until then, the body must sustain itself on whatever it took in yesterday, on memory and anticipation. This is the transition hour between night and day, when the darkness loosens its grip and the light begins its long climb toward morning. The day begins in earnest, and there is work to be done. Endless work that will continue until darkness falls again and the cycle renews itself. You move through the hall toward the chapel, following the flow of others who are making the same journey. The chapel occupies one of the castle's towers, a round chamber with narrow windows cut into the thick walls. Your stomach is hollow, a cavity that seems to echo when you move, but this is normal, familiar. Hunger is a constant presence, sometimes sharp and demanding, sometimes a dull ache that fades into the background of awareness, always there, always waiting. People are gathering in the chapel, arranging themselves in an order that reflects the rigid hierarchy of castle life. The Lord and his family enter last, and take their place at the front, nearest the altar. Behind them stand the senior members of the household, the steward with his keys, the marshal, the chamberlain, each in their proper place. It is always cold in the chapel, colder even in the corridors, because the stone here seems to hold cold with special tenacity, and the windows have no glass, only wooden shutters that can be closed against storms, but are open now to admit what little light the pre-dawn sky provides. The priest enters wrapped in dark vestments, simple wool worn over darker wool, and though his vestments are plain, they carry the weight of his office, marking him as a mediator between this world and the next. He is an older man, his face lined by years and weather, his hands reddened by cold. He begins the service, his voice filling the chapel with Latin words that echo off the stone walls, the familiar phrases of the divine office that have been repeated at this hour every day for centuries. Then the lesser folk, the skilled servants, the workers, the guards, everyone finding their place according to status and role. You find your own place among them, standing on the cold stone floor, and together you wait for the priest. The service is not long, perhaps a quarter of an hour, but standing still in the chapel's cold, your body begins to stiffen. Your feet ache from the cold, rising through the stone floor, entering your shoes, climbing your legs. Your hands clasped in front of you in an attitude of prayer grow numb. You do not understand all the Latin. Few people do except the educated clergy and nobility, but you know the rhythms of the service, when to bow your head, when to cross yourself, when to murmur responses that you learned by rote so long ago you cannot remember learning them. When the service ends, there is a collective, subtle relaxation, a releasing of held breath, and people begin to file out of the chapel, moving more quickly now, drawn toward warmth and the beginning of the day's work. Your breath and the breath of everyone gathered here creates clouds of vapor that drift upward toward the rafters, visible in the growing light from the windows. Through those narrow openings, the sky continues its slow brightening, deep blue fading to gray, the first hints of pink touching the eastern horizon like a blush. But you do not remain in the hall. Your duties call you elsewhere, to the kitchen, where the day's food preparation has already begun. The kitchen is separate from the main castle, set apart because of the constant danger of fire. You follow the flow of bodies back down the winding stairs, back toward the great hall where the fire burns more strongly now, the new logs catching and flaming, filling the hall with light and warmth. The wave of heat that meets you is overwhelming after cold. The kitchen contains several large hearths, all burning, fires at different stages and temperatures for different purposes. One fire for roasting, with a large spit already set up. One for boiling, with great iron cauldrons hanging from chains. One for baking, with an attached stone oven where bread will be made throughout the day. A kitchen fire that spreads could destroy a castle, and so the kitchens stand alone, connected to the great hall by a covered walkway that offers some protection from rain, but none from cold. You hurry across this walkway, the pre-dawn air sharp in your lungs, and push open the heavy kitchen door. The head cook is a large man with arms like tree trunks and a face perpetually reddened by heat and perhaps by temperament. He has been here since before matins, beginning preparations for a day that will see hundreds of meals prepared, from the Lord's elaborate dinner to the simple pottage that feeds the servants. The heat is tremendous. The kitchen workers are already sweating despite the early hour. This is their world, a world of fire and smoke and steam and constant motion. You take your place among the other kitchen workers, and the tasks begin. Water must be hauled from the well, bucket after heavy bucket, carried across the courtyard and poured into the cauldrons. what must be brought from the stores, armload after armload, to keep the fires burning. Vegetables must be prepared, onions and leeks and turnips and cabbages, all requiring peeling and chopping. You are assigned to help prepare the morning meal, a simpler affair than the midday dinner. The morning meal consists primarily of bread and ale, sometimes with cheese or cold meat for those of higher status, pottage for the others. You help prepare the pottage, a thick mixture of oats and barley cooked slowly in water, flavored with what is available. Today some onions and a bit of salt. He is already shouting orders, his voice carrying over the crackle of fires and the clang of metal on stone. He has been cooking in this kitchen for so many years that he knows by instinct when something is ready, when it needs more time, when the heat must be adjusted. Herbs must be fetched from where they hang, drying in bundles, crushed and prepared for seasoning. The kitchen fills with sound and smell. The fire crackles and roars. Metal clangs against stone. The cook shouts. Someone is butchering a pig at a large wooden table. The knife making wet sounds as it parts flesh. The smell is overwhelming, layers upon layers of it, with smoke sharp and pervasive. Cooking food, onions and oats and meat. Raw meat, the iron smell of blood. The pottage bubbles gently in its cauldron and you stir it with a long wooden paddle, keeping it from sticking to the bottom and burning. The heat from the fire is intense on your face and hands, and within a short time you are sweating despite the fact that your back, turned away from the fire, remains cool. As the sky outside shifts from gray to pale gold, the pace in the kitchen intensifies. The morning meal must be ready soon, and there are many mouths to feed. Loaves of bread from yesterday are brought out, their crusts hard, their interiors dense. These will be cut into thick slices into trenchers that will serve as plates for some, soaking up the pottage and then eaten themselves, soggy with food and flavor. Fresh bread is being prepared as well, dough that was mixed last night and left to rise slowly in the cool air, now being shaped into loaves and set in the oven to bake. Human sweat, unavoidable in this heat. Herbs, bundles of thyme, and sage hanging from the rafters. And underneath it all, something less pleasant, the accumulated smell of old grease and spilled food that has been ground into the floor rushes and can never quite be cleaned away. But you do not eat yet. Kitchen workers eat last, after everyone else has been served, taking what remains, and only after the cook gives permission. To steal food, even a crust of bread, is a serious offense that can result in severe punishment. When a morning meal is ready, servants come to carry it out, bearing large platters of bread, jugs of ale, bowls of pottage. They move in an organized stream from kitchen to hall, and soon you can hear the noise of people eating, the hum of conversation, the clatter of wooden bowls and horn cups. The smell of baking bread begins to permeate the kitchen, mixing with all the other smells, and despite having grown used to these smells, your mouth waters. You are hungry, so hungry, and the smell of food is almost painful. So you work hungry, as you have done countless times before, as you will do countless times again, your stomach hollow and aching while your hands prepare food for others. There is pottage left in the cauldron, scraps of bread, small ale that is too weak or too old to serve to the household. You take a wooden bowl and fill it with pottage, find a piece of bread that is more crust than anything else, and sit on a low stool near one of the fires to eat. When the serving is done and the platters return to the kitchen, emptied or nearly so, the cook finally nods to you and the other workers. Now you may eat. The pottage is hot and thick, bland but filling, the oats and barley swelling in your stomach, easing the hollow ache. The bread is hard and requires much chewing, but it is bread, the staff of life, and you eat it to the last crumb. The ale is thin and sour, but it is wet and washes down the bread, and you drink it gratefully. For a moment, as you sit and eat, the constant demands of the castle fade slightly, and there is only the basic satisfaction of hunger being eased, warmth on one side from the fire, the taste of food, however simple. It is a small grace, a brief respite, and you know it will not last. For the midday dinner, there will be multiple courses, at least for the Lord's table. Roasted meat, perhaps venison from a recent hunt, perhaps pork or mutton. Pies, elaborate constructions of pastry and meat flavored with expensive spices. Perhaps fish if it is a fast day, prepared in rich sauces. Vegetables prepared in various ways, baked or boiled or stewed. The cook is already calling out the next tasks. The midday dinner must be prepared, and this is the main meal of the day, the most elaborate, requiring hours of work. You set aside your empty bowl and rise, returning to your station, and the work begins again. You are set to work preparing vegetables again, an endless task of peeling and chopping. Your hands move automatically, the knife cutting through turnips and carrots, reducing them to chunks that will be added to stews or roasted alongside meat. The pile of prepared vegetables grows slowly, and your back begins to ache from standing bent over the work table. Sweet dishes, perhaps custard or fruit cooked in honey. And bread, of course, always bread, loaves and loaves of it in different qualities, white bread for the high table, darker bread for everyone else. Around you, the kitchen has become a scene of controlled chaos. At one hearth, a young boy turns the spit, slowly rotating the large joint of meat over the flames. This is hot, tedious work requiring constant attention. If he stops turning, the meat will burn on one side and remain raw on the other. Your hands become sore, the knife handle raising blisters where it rubs against your palm. But you continue because this is your role, your place in the vast mechanism that keeps the castle running. You must maintain a steady rhythm, turning and turning for hours, the heat from the fire reddening his face, sweat running down his forehead. The head cook moves among all this activity like a general among his troops, observing, correcting, occasionally stepping in to demonstrate a technique or fix a problem. He tastes from various pots, nodding approval or frowning and adding more seasoning. He checks the bread in the oven, judging by color and smell whether it is ready. At another hearth, an older woman tends several pots at once, stirring and tasting, adding pinches of salt or herbs, adjusting the seasoning by experience and instinct. She has been cooking in this kitchen for decades, since she was a young girl, and she knows by smell and sound when something is ready, when it needs more time, when the heat needs adjustment. As the morning progresses toward midday, as the sun climbs higher and sends pale light through the kitchen's small windows, the heat and noise and smell intensify. The fires burn hotter. More wood is added. More water is brought. The air becomes thick with smoke and steam, making your eyes water, coating your throat. When the bells ring for sext, the midday office, the meal is nearly ready. This is the moment of greatest intensity, when everything must come together at once, when the roasted meat must be done but not overdone, when the pies must emerge from the oven golden and perfect, when the sauces must be the right consistency, when the vegetables must be tender but not mushy. He inspects the roasting meat, inserting a knife to check if the juices run clear. His word is law in this kitchen, absolute and unquestioned. You wipe sweat from your forehead with your sleeve, and your sleeve comes away streaked with a mixture of sweat and soot and ash. The cook's voice rises, sharp and commanding, coordinating these final stages. Then it is done. The food is loaded onto great platters and trays. Servants appear to carry it out, and the procession to the great hall begins. First goes the Lord's food, carried with ceremony, covered with cloths to keep it warm. Then the food for the high table, where the Lord's family and important guests sit. Then food for the lower tables, in descending order of quality and elaboration. But this is the way of the world, the natural order as you understand it. The Lord is the Lord, placed above you by God's will, and it is right that he should eat well. Your role is to serve, and in serving faithfully you serve God as well. This is what the priest says, and you believe it, or at least you accept it, because what else is there to do? With the dinner served, there is a brief lull in the kitchen's intensity, though the work does not stop. There is always cleaning to do, preparation for the next meal, maintenance of the fires. You are assigned to clean the work tables, scrubbing them with coarse cloths and water, trying to remove accumulated grease and food particles. You watch it go, this feast you helped prepare, knowing you will not taste any of it, that the scraps that return, if any return, will be nothing like what left the kitchen. The Lord will eat roasted venison with rich sauce. You will have pottage again, perhaps with a bit of grease stirred in if you are fortunate. This is the only world you have ever known, the only world imaginable. Eventually you are allowed another break to eat. Again, there is pottage, thinner now, stretched with more water to feed everyone. There is dark bread, coarse rye bread that is the daily bread of the poor. There is ale, the same thin stuff from the morning. The work is hard on your hands, the water cold despite being drawn from near the fire, and your hands are already raw from the morning's work. You eat mechanically, too tired to taste much, and when you finish you allow yourself to sit for a few moments, resting your aching back and feet. The kitchen never truly rests, but the afternoon is somewhat calmer than the morning. There is preparation for the evening meal to begin, though this meal is lighter, usually leftovers from dinner, bread and cheese, perhaps cold meat. The fires are banked slightly, allowed to burn lower. Some kitchen workers are dismissed to tend to other tasks or to rest, and the kitchen holds only a core crew. The storage rooms are filled with barrels and sacks, baskets, and hanging bundles. Here are barrels of salted meat packed in brine to preserve it through the winter. Here are sacks of grain, oats and barley and rye, the foundation of the castle's diet. Here are root vegetables stored in sand, carrots and turnips and onions, lasting as long as they can before sprouting or rotting. You're kept on because there is always work for willing hands. You're sent to the castle's storage areas to fetch supplies for tomorrow. The storage areas are in the lower levels of the castle, partially underground, where the temperature remains cool year-round, perfect for preserving food. You descend narrow stairs into dimness, carrying a candle that provides barely enough light to see by. This food represents security, the difference between survival and starvation. A well-stocked castle can withstand a siege, can survive a hard winter, can feed its people when the roads are impassable and no supplies can be brought in. Here are rounds of cheese, hard cheeses that will keep for months. Here are hanging hams and sides of bacon, cured and smoked. Here are dried fish, their smell pungent and unmistakable. Here are baskets of apples, carefully stored, the best ones picked over regularly to remove any that show signs of rot. The castle's provisioning is a constant concern, a careful balance of consumption and preservation, of using the oldest stores before they spoil, while keeping enough in reserve for emergencies. The afternoon passes in this fashion, a mixture of tasks large and small, each necessary, each contributing to the castle's functioning. You haul more water because the water barrels must always be full. You turn the spit for a while, giving the boy a rest, feeling the heat of the fire on your face and arms. You chop more vegetables. You fill baskets with what you were sent to fetch, onions and turnips for tomorrow's cooking, and carry them back up the narrow stairs, your candle casting wild shadows on the stone walls. The baskets are heavy, and by the time you reach the kitchen again, your arms are shaking with effort. You set them down where the cook indicates and lean against the wall for a moment, catching your breath. You sweep the floor, though sweeping does little good when the floor is covered with rushes that are themselves filled with dropped food and debris. The chapel is full of shadows now, the narrow windows admitting only the fading blue light of dusk. Candles have been lit, their flames small and steady, casting a golden glow over the altar. The service proceeds as services do, the Latin phrases familiar and comforting in their repetition. As the light outside begins to fade, as the autumn afternoon moves toward evening, the bells ring for vespers. This is the evening office, and again people gather in the chapel for prayer. You are released from the kitchen to attend and climb the stairs to the chapel once more, your legs heavy with fatigue. You mouth the responses automatically, your mind drifting, thinking of nothing in particular, or perhaps thinking of everything in a vague, unfocused way. You are tired, so tired, and the day is not yet done. The hall is filling with smoke from the fire and from the rushlights and candles that provide illumination now that the sun has set. The smoke rises toward the rafters, but some of it hangs in the air, making your eyes sting. The hall is noisy with conversation, with laughter, with the sounds of a large household at ease after a day of labor. After vespers comes the evening meal, a simpler affair than dinner. In the great hall, people gather again at the long tables. Bread and cheese are distributed, cold meat from dinner, ale, and sometimes wine for the high table. You are not involved in serving this meal, so you take your own portion, bread and a bit of cheese, and sit on a bench near the great hearth to eat. At the high table, the Lord sits with his family, and their conversation is more subdued, more formal. But even there you can see the relaxation that comes with the end of the day's business. You eat your bread and cheese slowly, making it last, and you drink your ale, and for a little while you are content, or at least not actively uncomfortable. The warmth of the fire is pleasant. The food eases the hunger, and the company of others, even if you speak little, is comforting in its way. Eventually the evening draws on, and people begin to disperse to their night's rest, or to other tasks if they have them. Some will remain in the hall, sleeping on benches or on the floor near the fire. Others return to their chambers if they have chambers. Still others go to the barracks or the stables or wherever their duties require them to be. You make your way back to your own small chamber, climbing the dark stairs once more, feeling your way along the walls. The temperature has dropped significantly now that the sun is down and the stone walls radiate cold. Your chamber, when you reach it, is dark and cold, the air inside barely distinguishable from the air in the corridor. But before sleep takes you, you lie for a moment in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the castle at night. Distant voices muffled by stone, footsteps in the corridor outside, the wind outside, rising, whistling through the narrow windows and arrow slits. Somewhere a door closes, somewhere someone coughs. You remove only your shoes, shaking out straw to refill them for tomorrow. The rest of your clothes you keep on because they are all the warmth you have. You lie down on the straw mattress and pull the wool blanket over you, and despite the cold, despite the hardness of the bed, despite the aches in your back and arms and feet, exhaustion pulls you down towards sleep. These sounds are familiar, the sounds you hear every night, and they're almost comforting in their predictability. You close your eyes and sleep comes, and for a few hours there is rest until the bells ring for matins and the cycle begins again. This is one day in a medieval castle, one day among thousands, each much like the others, marked by the same rhythms of work and prayer, hunger and cold, exhaustion and brief rest. But there is more to know, more to feel, more layers to this life that unfolds in stone and firelight. The thick stone walls that provided defense against attack also created a building nearly impossible to heat effectively. Stone absorbs cold and radiates it inward, and while this same quality keeps castles cool in summer, in winter it made them almost unbearable. Consider the matter of warmth, or rather the constant struggle against its absence. Cold was a fact of life that colored every moment, every decision, every comfort or lack thereof. A medieval castle, for all its grandeur and military might, was a desperately cold place to live for much of the year. Fire was the only defense against this cold, and fire was both essential and expensive. What had to be cut, transported, stored. A large castle might burn through several wagon loads of wood every day in winter, feeding the great hearth in the hall, fires in the kitchen, braziers in the Lord's private chambers. But even with all these fires burning, much of the castle remained cold. People dealt with this cold in ways that might seem strange to you, wrapped as you are now in your own warm bed. Layers of clothing were essential, wool and linen and leather wrapped around the body, trapping air and body heat. People wore the same clothes day and night, rarely removing them because to undress was to expose oneself to the full force of the cold. The walls are wet with condensation, moisture from breath and cooking condensing on the cold stone and running down in slow tears that never quite dry. Corridors, stairways, outer chambers, towers, all stayed cold, the stone walls conducting away any warmth that tried to penetrate them. Windows were few and small, both for defense and to keep out the cold. Many windows had wooden shutters, but no glass, because glass was expensive and rare, known only in churches and the wealthiest establishments. Even when shutters were closed, wind could penetrate, howling through cracks and gaps, finding every weakness in the building's armor against the weather. Beds were designed to conserve heat. The heavy curtains that surrounded many beds were not just for privacy, but for warmth, creating a small enclosed space that could be warmed by body heat and breath. People often slept in shared beds, 2 or 3 or more to a bed, because shared body heat was warmer than sleeping alone. Clothes became dirty, impregnated with sweat and body oils, and this dirt actually helped insulate, adding another layer between skin and air. Tapestries hung on walls helped insulate, trapping air between fabric and stone, and they also blocked drafts. But tapestries were luxury items, found only in the best chambers, and even with them the cold was only slightly reduced. Cold affected everything. It made injuries more painful, joints stiffer, illness more dangerous. People with ailments of the lungs suffered terribly in winter, breathing cold air that irritated damaged tissue. Children slept with parents, servants slept together in groups, and even nobles might share beds with siblings or attendants. This was practical, necessary, the only way to get through the coldest nights without waking numb and aching. Old people felt the cold more keenly, their bodies less able to generate heat, and many elderly folks simply did not survive the winter, dying quietly in the coldest months, found stiff and cold in their beds, or near a fire that had burned out during the night. Think too about the matter of cleanliness, or what passed for cleanliness in a world without running water, without soap in abundance, without the understanding of disease that would come centuries later. Water was essential for life, but also a source of labor and concern. Cold influenced behavior and routine. People stayed close to fires whenever possible. They moved quickly through cold spaces to reach warm ones. They rose later in winter because leaving bed meant facing the cold. They went to bed earlier because once the sun set and darkness fell, there was little reason to be awake in the cold and dark, burning expensive candles or rushlights for light. The best castles were built near reliable water sources, a river or stream, or better still had a well within the walls so that water could not be cut off during a siege. Fetching water was constant work, usually assigned to the lowest servants. Buckets had to be lowered into the well, raised full, carried to wherever the water was needed, and this task was repeated dozens or hundreds of times each day. Water for cooking was hauled to the kitchen. Water for the Lord's washing was hauled to his chambers. Water for the stables was hauled there. Bathing was rare, but not unknown. The popular image of medieval people as universally filthy is an exaggeration born of later centuries looking back with insufficient understanding. People did bathe, though not frequently by modern standards, and bathing was a laborious undertaking. Water had to be heated, which required fire and time and fuel. Castles needed vast quantities of water for drinking, cooking, washing, and for the animals that lived within or near the castle walls. Water for laundry, for cleaning, for mixing mortar for repairs, all of it had to be hauled by hand, bucket by heavy bucket, the rope burning palms, the weight straining backs and shoulders. The Lord and his family might bathe once a month or so, more often in summer, less in winter when heating water was even more burdensome. Servants rarely bathed fully, perhaps a few times a year, usually before major religious festivals. But people did wash, at least partially, more frequently. Hands and faces were washed daily, usually in cold water. Enough water for a bath might require heating several large pots, and this water then had to be poured into a wooden tub. The tub was often lined with cloth to protect the bather from splinters, and sometimes herbs were added to the water for fragrance, rose petals or lavender if they could be had. Laundry was done infrequently, a major undertaking that required heating large quantities of water, soaking clothes in lye soap made from wood ash and animal fat, or even in stale urine, which served as a cleaning agent, harsh but effective. The fabric would be pounded and scrubbed, then rinsed and wrung out and spread to dry. Feet might be washed weekly, more often in summer when bare feet accumulated more dirt. These partial washings were more practical than full baths and required less labor and fuel. Latrines in castles were called garderobes, a name that meant wardrobe because the ammonia smell from the shaft below was thought to repel moths and vermin, so valuable clothes were sometimes stored in these chambers. A garderobe was typically a small chamber built into the thickness of the castle wall, with a stone or wooden seat over a shaft that dropped down to empty outside the castle wall or into a cesspit below. The process could take an entire day for a large household's linens and clothes. Clothes were not washed after each wearing, but were aired, brushed, and spot cleaned as needed, and washed only when they became obviously soiled or developed an odor that even the accustomed noses of the time found offensive. Multiple floors might have garderobes that all emptied into the same shaft, a vertical tunnel of human waste that accumulated far below until someone was assigned the unpleasant task of cleaning it out. For those without access to a garderobe, there were chamber pots, simple pottery vessels that were used and then emptied, usually into a ditch or cesspit, or simply thrown out a window into the castle yard where rain would eventually wash it away or not. Garderobes smelled, of course, sharply and unmistakably, but they were functional and, in their way, more sanitary than many alternatives. The waste fell away from the living areas, and while the area outside the castle wall where the garderobe chute emptied might be unpleasant, it was outside, away from where people lived and slept and ate. The smell in a castle was something that would be immediately noticeable to a modern visitor, though to those who lived there, it was simply the smell of life, normal and unremarkable. There was the ever-present smell of smoke from the fires that burned constantly, with smoke that permeated everything, clothes and hair and skin, that filled the great hall and drifted through corridors, that stung eyes and caught in throats. There was the smell of unwashed bodies and clothes, not overwhelming because people did wash partially and regularly enough, but definitely present, a warm human smell of sweat and skin oils. There was the smell of cooking food and old food spilled into the rushes on the floor. There was the smell of animals because castles often house horses, dogs, and sometimes other animals within the walls or in adjoining structures, and animals smell of themselves, of dung and urine and hide. There was the smell of the garderobes, a faint but persistent background note. Emptying chamber pots was one of the lowest tasks, assigned to the lowest servants, and the contents were carried out of the castle to designated dumping areas. The carriers try not to breathe too deeply, try not to spill on themselves. The floors of the castle were often covered with rushes, dried reeds, or straw spread in thick layers. Fresh rushes were laid over old, and occasionally, perhaps once or twice a year, the whole mass would be cleared out and replaced. But in between, the rushes became repositories for everything that fell. Food scraps, spilled drink, tracked in mud, dog urine and feces, human spittle, dropped bones, vegetable peelings, and other less identifiable matter. There was the smell of the rushes on the floor, which became damp and began to rot in the lower layers, giving off a musty vegetable smell. All these smells mingled into something complex and layered, sometimes pleasant, sometimes not, but always there, the olfactory signature of castle life. Fleas and lice were nearly universal companions in this world. Everyone had them, from the highest noble to the lowest servant. Scratching was constant and unconscious, a background activity like breathing. Periodically, clothes might be boiled to kill lice, or fumigated with smoke and herbs. But the pests always returned, finding their way back through contact with other people, through shared beds, through the very air of the crowded castle. Now let your thoughts turn to food, for food was a central concern of castle life, both in its abundance and its absence, its quality and its monotony. The Lord's table, the high table in the great hall, displayed the wealth and status of the castle through the quality and variety of food served. The rushes helped insulate the floor and provided a softer surface than bare stone, but they also harbored fleas, lice, mice, and other vermin that found the dropped food and the warmth of human habitation irresistible. Flea bites and lice bites were so common they were hardly noticed unless they became infected, which sometimes happened, leading to sores and further discomfort. For everyone else, food was simpler and more monotonous. The foundation of the diet was bread and pottage, day after day, week after week, year after year. Bread was made from whatever grain was available and affordable. Wheat for the wealthy, carefully bolted to remove the bran and produce white flour. Multiple courses, fine white bread made from bolted wheat flour. Roasted meats prepared with skill and seasoned with expensive spices from distant lands. Elaborate pies constructed like architecture and pastry. Imported wines from France or Spain. These were markers of privilege and power. The Lord's food was not just sustenance, but display, a demonstration of prosperity. Pottage was a thick stew or porridge made from grains or legumes, oats, barley, peas, lentils, cooked with water into a thick mass. Vegetables were added if available, onions, leeks, cabbage, turnips, and sometimes a bit of meat or a bone for flavor. Though meat was a rare addition to the pottage of common folk, reserved for feast days or when an animal died and had to be eaten quickly before the meat spoiled. Rye and barley for the common folk, ground coarse with bits of bran, and even ground peas or beans mixed in to stretch the more expensive grains. The bread was dense and substantial, darker than the bread you know, heavier, requiring good teeth and strong jaws. It filled the belly and provided the bulk of daily calories. Meat was consumed in quantities that varied dramatically by status. The Lord and his family might eat meat daily, beef, pork, mutton, venison, fowl of various kinds, and fish on the days when meat was forbidden. The type of meat indicated status. Venison from hunting was particularly prized, both for its flavor and because hunting was a noble pursuit, restricted by law to the upper classes. Pottage was cooked in large pots and could sit over the fire for hours or even days, with new ingredients added as needed, and the whole kept hot so that people could dip out a portion whenever they needed to eat. It was filling and nutritious if bland, providing sustenance without pleasure, and it formed the basis of most meals for most people most of the time. The church required fasting on certain days, Fridays always, Wednesdays in some regions, the entire season of Lent from Ash Wednesday to Easter, and various holy days throughout the year. On fast days, no meat was eaten, and the diet consisted of fish, bread, vegetables, and dairy products if they were permitted, depending on the strictness of the fast. To eat venison was to display not just wealth, but privilege, the right to hunt in forests that were forbidden to commoners. Fresh meat was available when animals were slaughtered, usually in autumn when the herds were culled before winter, but much meat was preserved, salted in barrels, or smoked in special rooms, to last through the winter when fresh meat was scarce. Dairy products were important. Milk when it was available fresh, which was not long, because milk spoiled quickly without refrigeration. So it was often made into cheese, which kept much longer. Cheese was a valuable food, high in fat and protein, and wheels of hard cheese could be stored for months, improving with age. This meant that fish was consumed in large quantities, both fresh fish when available from rivers or the sea, and preserved fish, salted herring and dried cod, when fresh fish could not be had. Salted herring was a staple of the fast day diet, cheap and plentiful, though its intense saltiness had to be soaked out before eating, and even then it left you desperately thirsty. Vegetables were plentiful in season, but scarce in winter. Root vegetables that stored well, turnips, carrots, onions, parsnips, were available through much of the winter, kept in cool storage rooms packed in sand or straw. Butter was used in cooking and as a spread, preserved with salt to keep it from going rancid, though it often developed a strong flavor that those unused to it might find unpleasant. But leafy greens and fresh vegetables disappeared with the first frost and did not return until spring, which meant that winter diets were particularly monotonous, lacking the variety and freshness of summer eating. By late winter, even the stored vegetables were starting to sprout or rot, and the ones that remained were shriveled and past their prime, but still eaten because what else was there? Ale was the universal drink, consumed at every meal by everyone, men, women, and children, because water was often unsafe to drink, contaminated by waste and other pollutants that no one understood, but that everyone knew could make you sick. The brewing process, with its boiling water, made ale safer, killing whatever invisible agents caused disease. Ale was made in the castle, a constant task supervised by the castle's brewer, usually a woman skilled in the art. It was relatively low in alcohol, meant to be drunk in quantity for hydration and nutrition as much as for any intoxicating effect. Small ale was even weaker, suitable for children and for drinking throughout the workday. Fruits were seasonal treats: apples, pears, cherries, plums, eaten fresh in their season and sometimes preserved, dried in the sun, or cooked in honey to make them keep longer. But for most people, fruit was an occasional pleasure rather than a regular part of the diet, something to be savored when available, remembered during the long months when it was not. Wine was a luxury, imported from regions where grapes grew, and expensive enough that only the Lord's table saw it regularly. Wine came in barrels and was stored in the buttery, a cool room where beverages were kept. Meals were social occasions, eaten communally at long tables in the great hall. There was a strict hierarchy in seating, with the Lord and his family at the high table on a raised platform. Looking down over the rest of the hall, the most important servants and retainers at tables nearby, and lesser folk further away, until at the very back and sides were those of lowest status, eating the plainest food, served last, and with little ceremony. Stronger ale was reserved for feasts and special occasions when celebration called for loosening inhibitions. The butler, whose title came from the bottles and barrels he tended, was responsible for maintaining the wine, ensuring it did not turn to vinegar, serving at the Lord's table with a ceremony befitting such a valuable commodity. Eating was done with fingers and knives. Forks were virtually unknown, a strange Italian innovation that would not become common for centuries. Each person had a knife, usually carried at the belt, used for cutting meat and spearing food and eating. Bread trenchers served as plates for many, thick slices of stale bread that absorbed juices and sauces and could then be eaten or given to the poor who waited at the castle gate for scraps. Spoons were used for pottage and liquid dishes, carved from wood or horn, the metal spoons reserved for the wealthy. Food was served in order of status, with the best food going to the high table and progressively simpler fare to the lower tables, so that everyone could see and understand their place in the social order with every meal. Table manners existed and were taken seriously, at least at the high table where behavior reflected on the Lord and his household. Manners books instructed diners not to speak with their mouths full, not to pick their teeth at the table with their knife, not to wipe their noses on the tablecloth, not to dip food that had been bitten into a common dish, and various other guidelines that suggest these behaviors were common enough to require explicit prohibition. After a meal, the scraps were not wasted. Leftover food from the high table might be passed down to lower tables or given to servants. What remained went to feed the castle's dogs or the poor who gathered at the castle gate. In times of hardship, even scraps had value and nothing was discarded lightly. Bones were given to the dogs or boiled for broth. Cups were shared, passed around the table. made of wood or horn for common folk, metal or even glass for the wealthy. And drinking from a shared cup created bonds, a physical manifestation of community and trust. At the lower tables, manners were less refined, people eating quickly and efficiently, focused on filling their bellies rather than displaying gentility. Now let the seasons turn in your mind, for time was marked not just by the daily offices of prayer, but by the turning of the year, the cycle of planting and harvest, feast and famine, light and darkness. Winter was the hardest season, the time when the castle closed in on itself and survival became the primary concern. Cold was constant, penetrating, inescapable except when standing directly by a fire. And even then, only the side facing the fire was warm while your back remained cold. People's hands and feet were always cold, noses red and running, breath visible, every movement an effort against the body's desire to curl up and conserve heat. Warmth was scarce and precious, fought for and hoarded. Stale bread was made into trenchers or soaked in liquid and eaten. Every scrap of food was used because food was precious, the product of labor and land, and the uncertain favor of weather. The days were short and the nights long, darkness falling by mid-afternoon and not lifting until late morning, so that more than half of each day was spent in cold and dark. Food stores were depleted slowly through the winter, beginning in plenty in November with the autumn slaughter, fresh meat and new harvested grain and vegetables in abundance. But as weeks turned to months, the stores diminished. The fresh meat was eaten first, then the salted and smoked meat. The best vegetables were eaten first, then the merely adequate, then the shriveled and sprouting. People crowded around fires, reluctant to move away into the cold. They stayed in bed as long as possible, cocooned in whatever warmth they had managed to accumulate overnight. If the harvest had been poor, or if the winter was particularly long, if some disaster had struck, fire or disease or raids that destroyed stores, then hunger became a serious threat. Then starvation became a possibility. People tightened their belts, literally and figuratively rationing the remaining food, giving the largest portions to those who did the hardest work, to the soldiers who defended the castle and the servants who kept it running, while children and elderly got less, because children were resilient and the elderly were going to die soon anyway. By late winter, by February and March, food supplies were running low, and people were hungry in a way that went beyond missing a meal, a deep, persistent hunger that never quite went away, that gnawed at your belly and made you think constantly of food, dream of feasts, remember meals from months past with the kind of detail usually reserved for precious memories. Spring brought relief like a physical sensation, like a great weight being lifted. The days lengthened, the weather warmed, at least compared to winter's depths. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and its light grew stronger. And after the long darkness, this light was like a blessing, like a physical substance that could be absorbed through the skin. Fresh food became available again. The first spring greens pushing up through the soil, dandelions and nettles and wild garlic, gathered eagerly and eaten in quantity because they tasted of life and hope after the dead preserved foods of winter. Stored roots that had lasted through winter, wrinkled and sprouting, but still edible, could finally be consumed without worrying about needing them tomorrow. Fields were plowed and planted, a massive effort involving most of the castle's population and the peasants from the surrounding villages who owed labor service to the Lord. The heavy plow was dragged through the soil by teams of oxen, turning the earth, preparing it for seed. This was back-breaking work, walking behind the plow all day, guiding it through the soil, removing rocks and roots that impeded its progress, breathing the smell of fresh-turned earth, feeling the sun on your back growing stronger each day. A brutal calculus of survival that was not spoken of but understood by everyone. Chickens began laying more frequently with the longer days, eggs appearing in nests like small miracles, each one precious, often saved for the Lord's table or for those recovering from illness. Because eggs were strengthening, everyone knew that. Summer was the season of plenty, at least for those who worked the land. Food was abundant, vegetables ripening in gardens, fruits on trees, fresh meat from hunting, long days allowing more work to be done. Seed was scattered by hand, broadcast in wide arcs, each handful of grain representing hope for the future, for the harvest that would come in autumn if the weather was kind, if the rains came, but not too much, if the sun shone, but not too hot, if pests and disease did not destroy the growing crops. Summer was also the season of travel, when roads dried and became passable, when the Lord might host guests or travel himself to visit other estates or attend the king's court. These journeys were not undertaken lightly, requiring extensive preparation, packing supplies, arranging accommodations, assembling a retinue of servants and guards sufficient to demonstrate status and provide protection. Autumn was harvest time, the most critical season of the year, the time when the success or failure of the harvest determined whether the castle would thrive or merely survive through the coming winter. The warmth was a relief after the long cold, though the castle stone walls kept the interior pleasantly cool even on hot days, a quality that in winter was a curse but in summer became a blessing. The roads were dangerous with bandits and the lawless, and to travel alone or with insufficient numbers was to invite robbery or worse. The work was exhausting and endless from dawn to dusk, and sometimes beyond, cutting the grain with sickles, binding it into sheaves, stacking the sheaves into shocks to dry, then hauling them to the threshing floor where they would be beaten to separate grain from chaff. The harvest was everyone's concern, every able body pressed in his service, because the grain had to be cut and gathered and threshed before the weather turned, before rain could rot in the fields or early frost could damage it. Harvest was also a time of cautious celebration, relief that the work was done, satisfaction in a job completed, barns and storerooms filling with grain and hay and vegetables. There would be a harvest feast, better food than usual, ale flowing more freely, music and dancing, a brief release of tension before winter's grip tightened again. Everyone who could work did work, even children and elderly, because the harvest was life, was survival, was everything that would sustain the castle through the winter to come. Backs ached, hands blistered, muscles screamed with fatigue, but the work continued because it had to, because there was no choice, because winter was coming and would not wait. Religious festivals punctuated the year, giving structure and meaning to the passage of time, providing breaks from labor and opportunities for celebration. Christmas was the greatest feast, 12 days of celebration in the darkest part of winter, a time when work stopped or at least slowed, when the great hall was decorated with evergreen branches that brought life and color into the cold stone space, when special foods were prepared, mince pies and roasted birds and sweet cakes, when a Yule log was brought in and set to burn in the great hearth. Easter was also major, marking the end of Lent's fasting with celebration and feasting. The church services longer and more elaborate. The priest's vestments changed from the somber purple of Lent to the glorious white and gold of resurrection. Eggs were decorated and given as gifts, symbols of new life, colored with dyes made from plants or painted with simple designs. But the celebration was always tempered by awareness that the harvest now gathered had to last until next harvest, 9 or 10 months away, and careful rationing would be necessary to make it last, and prayer that it would be enough. Where it would burn for all 12 days, kept alive because to let it go out would bring bad luck for the coming year. There were saints' days throughout the year, some marked by the whole community, others specific to particular churches or regions. Each saint's day might bring a respite from work, or at least from the hardest work, and perhaps slightly better food, a bit of meat or cheese added to the usual pottage, ale that was less watered. The castle was not just a building, but a community, a complex social organism with many roles and relationships, all governed by strict hierarchy and equally strict codes of behavior. At the top was the Lord, the owner of the castle and the lands around it, the person to whom everyone else owed loyalty and service, the center around which the entire household revolved. Special breads were baked, rich with butter and eggs and fruits, a contrast to the plain fare of Lent. These breaks were necessary, physically and spiritually, providing rest and renewal, reminding people that life was more than endless work, that there was joy and celebration to be found even in a hard world. The Lord was responsible for defense, for justice, for the welfare of his lands and people, at least in theory. In practice, lords varied widely in competence and character, some just and capable, managing their estates well and treating their people with whatever fairness the times allowed. Others tyrannical or incompetent, squandering wealth, oppressing their people, making enemies who would eventually destroy them. The Lord's power within his domain was nearly absolute, though he in turn owed fealty to a higher lord or to the king, and this chain of obligation stretched from the lowest peasant to the highest noble, to the king himself, to God in heaven, each level owing service and loyalty to the level above. The Lord's family shared in his status, his wife managing the household, overseeing the servants, supervising food preparation and storage, ensuring the smooth running of domestic affairs. This was no small task. A large castle household might include hundreds of people, all requiring feeding, direction, coordination. The lady was responsible for ensuring that meals were prepared properly, that linens were cleaned, that clothes were mended, that medicines were prepared for the sick, that the 100 daily details of running a household were attended to. Children of the Lord were raised within the castle in their early years, but older boys from the age of 7 or so were often sent to other castles to serve as pages and then squires, learning the skills of knighthood, how to ride and fight, how to behave in noble company, how to serve a lord properly. This fostering created bonds between noble families, networks of obligation and alliance that would last a lifetime. A good lord could make the difference between a thriving estate and a struggling one, between people who were merely poor and people who were desperate. She was also expected to show charity, distributing alms to the poor who came to the gate, visiting the sick in the castle and the surrounding villages, demonstrating the virtues expected of her rank, piety and mercy and generosity. The castle also housed a complex hierarchy of servants and retainers, layers upon layers of status and responsibility. At the top of this hierarchy were officials like the steward, who managed the Lord's estates and finances, keeping careful records of income and expenses, collecting rents and fees, ensuring the Lord's properties were productive. The marshals supervised the stables and hunting, caring for the valuable horses, training and keeping the hunting dogs, organizing hunts, which were both recreation and a source of food. The chamberlain oversaw the Lord's private chambers, attending to his personal needs, maintaining his clothes and possessions. Girls were educated in domestic skills, in needlework and the management of a household, in religion, and sometimes reading if their family valued learning, preparing them for marriage into other noble families, for lives as ladies of other castles where they would replicate what their mothers had done. Below these officials were specialized servants, each with their specific role and responsibilities. The cook commanded the kitchen, a position of real authority because he controlled the food that sustained everyone in the castle. The brewer made the ale that everyone drank daily. The baker made the bread that was the foundation of every meal. The pantler managed the pantry where bread and dry goods were stored. The butler managed the buttery where ale and wine were kept, tapping barrels, ensuring supplies did not run out. There were laundresses who washed linens, boiling great vats of water and pounding cloth to remove dirt. The chancellor or clerk, if the Lord had one, handled correspondence and records, essential in an increasingly administrative age when written documents were becoming more important for establishing property rights and legal claims. There were grooms for the horses, mucking stables, feeding and watering the animals, grooming them, checking for injuries or illness. Kennel men for the hunting dogs, feeding them, training them, caring for them when they were injured in the hunt. Seamstresses who mended and made clothes, their needles moving constantly because fabric was expensive and nothing was discarded while it could still be repaired. Ladies' maids who attended the lady of the castle, dressing her, arranging her hair, running her errands. Then there were general servants, the numerous, mostly unnamed people who did the actual physical labor of keeping the castle running. The people we have been following through their day. They hauled water and wood, the endless hauling that never stopped. They cleaned floors and garderobes, swept out rushes and scattered new ones, emptied chamber pots, washed dishes and pots and pans. They served meals, carrying heavy platters from kitchen to hall and back again. They assisted in the kitchen, doing the preparatory work, the chopping and peeling, the stirring and tending of fires. They carried messages, running through the castle on errands that seemed urgent to those who sent them. Falconers for the hunting birds if the Lord kept a mews, hooded hawks and falcons that were status symbols as much as hunting tools, requiring specialized care and training, temperamental and valuable. Some people in the castle were there temporarily, guests of the Lord, visiting nobles who brought their own retinues and expected hospitality, merchants who had come to sell goods, traveling entertainers granted shelter, pilgrims seeking a safe place to spend the night. Medieval hospitality was a serious obligation, both religious and social, and a lord was expected to provide food and shelter to travelers of appropriate status. They performed countless other tasks, all necessary, none particularly valued, working long hours for room and board and perhaps a bit of clothing, with little status and no wealth, no prospect of rising much in the world, yet still part of the great household, part of the community, connected to something larger than themselves. The castle might also house a priest or chaplain, responsible for the chapel and for the spiritual welfare of the household, conducting services, hearing confessions, providing counsel, administering the sacraments. In larger establishments, there might be several clergy, a full chapel staff conducting regular services. This could be a significant burden, especially for castles located on major roads where traffic was constant. But it was also an opportunity to gather news and information, to hear what was happening in the wider world, to make connections that might prove valuable. Soldiers formed another distinct group within the castle. Men at arms, archers, men sworn to defend the castle and serve the Lord in war, maintained at the Lord's expense, eating his food, sleeping in his barracks. In peacetime they trained, practicing with sword and spear and bow, maintaining the castle's defenses, repairing walls and gates, standing watch on the towers. The chaplain was often an educated man, literate in Latin and sometimes in the vernacular, possibly the only literate person in the castle besides the lord or his clerk, and he might serve as teacher, scribe, or advisor in addition to his religious duties, his education making him valuable beyond his spiritual role. Relationships within this complex community were governed by strict hierarchy and codes of behavior that everyone understood and followed, because to violate them was to invite punishment or expulsion, to lose one's place in the community and become an outcast, which in this world could mean death. Everyone knew their place and stayed in it. Their presence was a reminder that a castle's primary purpose was military, a fortress designed to withstand attack and to serve as a base for projecting the Lord's power, a place from which he could control the surrounding territory, enforce his will, defend against enemies. Personal relationships existed, of course, friendships between people of similar status, romances that sometimes led to marriage if the parties were of appropriate rank, enmities born of slights or competition or simple incompatibility. But these relationships were always shaped by social position, always constrained by hierarchy. A servant might be fond of another servant, might marry and raise children if the Lord permitted it, but the gulf between servant and noble was vast and unbridgeable. The Lord's word was law within his domain. But even lords were bound by custom and expectation, by the need to maintain their reputation and honor, to be seen as just and capable, to fulfill the obligations their position imposed. Violence was a possibility always present beneath the surface of daily life, both the organized violence of war and the personal violence of disputes and punishments. Men carried weapons routinely, knives at least, swords if they were of status or military role, and they were trained to use them, had used them, would use them again. Fights broke out over insults real or imagined, over disputes about status or possessions, over matters of honor that to modern minds might seem trivial, but in that time were deadly serious. The Lord's justice was often harsh, punishments designed to deter and to demonstrate power. Stories of romance between nobility and commoners were popular in songs and tales, star-crossed lovers defying social barriers. But in reality, such relationships were scandalous and rare, almost always ending badly for the person of lower status. But alongside the violence and harshness was also community and mutual dependence, bonds of loyalty and affection that developed between people who lived and worked together for years or even lifetimes. A servant who had worked for a lord for decades might be treated with favor, given lighter duties in old age, provided for when unable to work. A servant caught stealing might be branded with a hot iron, marked as a thief for life, or might have a hand cut off, or might be hanged if the theft was serious enough or if the Lord wished to make an example. A man who struck another might face retaliation from the victim's family or legal punishment, depending on the circumstances and the status of those involved. Now, let the rhythm of different lives flow through your awareness, seeing how the same hours were experienced differently, depending on one's role, how the castle contained many worlds within its walls. The Lord rises later than most, perhaps around dawn or shortly after, in a chamber that is the best in the castle, with glazed windows that let in light while keeping out wind, with tapestries covering the walls, with a large bed surrounded by heavy curtains, with braziers to provide heat, charcoal burning in metal bowls, the smoke vented through small chimneys. He does not wake to cold and darkness like the servants, but to relative warmth and comfort in the attendance of personal servants who have been waiting for him to wake, who help him dress in fine clothes, will dyed in rich colors, reds and blues and purples that are expensive and mark his status, linen undergarments that are changed daily or nearly so, soft against his skin. A soldier who fought bravely might be rewarded with land or position, or at least with respect. These were not guarantees, depending entirely on the Lord's character and whim, but they were possibilities, and they gave people reason to hope and to strive, reason to remain loyal and to work hard. Leather shoes or boots that fit well and are kept supple with regular care. He washes with water that has been heated and brought to his chamber in ewers, uses cloths to dry himself, and his hair and beard, if he wears one, are trimmed and combed by his servant, maintaining an appearance appropriate to his rank. This is not vanity, but necessary maintenance of status, because appearance matters, because a lord who looks disheveled or unkempt loses respect, and respect is the